WSOU 89.5 FM, the loudest rock. I'm Valentino, and I'm joined today with Corey from the legendary metalcore band Trivium. How are you doing today, Corey?
I am good. Just hanging out.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. Well, your new record, In the Court of the Dragon, comes out October 8th. That release date is this Friday. How you feeling?
Feeling good. We're excited. It's always fun when a new record's coming out. Fans seem to be stoked on it. From the songs we put out, people have been really responding well. So it's a good sign. And so it's, just busy with lots of stuff, with being on tour. They didn't want to swamp us with doing interviews during the day since we had to play. So as soon as we got back from tour, it's putting us to work. So it's good to be kind of feeling like there's some normalcy now that, we got the tour and now we get to talk about the record. So it's a nice feeling.
Of course. I know you mentioned that tour. We definitely have to talk a little bit about that. What has been dubbed as the metal tour of the year. And some people have been calling it like the metal tour of the decade. Absolutely crazy lineup from start to finish. Megadeath, Lamb of God, Trivium, and of course, Hatebreed. Tell me a little bit about what that tour was like.
Oh, it was amazing. Just the fact, we got to be out on the road again and playing shows was a great feeling. The lineup was awesome. And the crowds were huge. So we couldn't have asked for anything better for, first tour back in like a year and a half. And then also a great tour to kind of get everyone aware that Trivium has a new record coming out right after the tour. So that was a great thing to have. Since we didn't have any touring for the previous record, we're kind of touring for two albums at the same time in a sense. Since songs from What the Dead Men Say, we got to play them in front of people for the first time on the tour as well. So it's good, great stuff. And it was awesome. It kind of sucked with all the COVID stuff, there was, rules and stuff not to kind of hang around with, which is kind of in your bubble, like on your bus. So we didn't really get to, besides saying, hey, in passing, there wasn't really a lot of the typical normal tour hanging out, partying or anything like that. So it was a pretty relaxed, chill tour, but for the first time first time being on tour in a long time, it was kind of nice that there wasn't all this circus backstage with lots of guests and meet and greets and all this stuff. So we got to just kind of go out on the road and just kind of enjoy playing shows and just being out of the house for a little bit.
I never thought about it like that, but you're right. It's kind of like the perfect way to ease you back into touring, because every show that I've seen so far, everyone's wearing masks 6 feet apart. They, all the crew, the band, the second they're done performing, they mask up. So it is kind of like an almost antisocial tour. But
we also kind of prided ourselves on the tour of wanting, because so many tours since people started kind of getting back out on the road the last, since August-ish or something like that. Just seeing how many people that have canceled shows or canceled tours because of COVID issues or concerns, we wanted to kind of kick the narrative and show that you can finish a tour and not have to cancel. And there's ways you can go about being as safe as possible. So I think we were able to get through the whole tour. Everyone's still good. So, there's definitely, you can do it if you just, really, you don't get lax on rules and, always masking and staying away from people and just doing as much as you can to make sure you put yourself in the least amount of, harm's way.
Absolutely. And what's so cool is you mentioned this earlier, but especially with this tour, this has to be a weird one because you're right. You're touring on two separate records, and it's got to kind of be strange because the newest album that you have out right now is a year old, which is kind of and you're kind of supporting that still, playing those songs live, but also you have a brand new record coming out at the time in a month. That's got to be a weird dynamic of headspace.
Yeah, it's definitely something new for us. And usually I don't think it was maybe in the 80s bands would put out a record every year. But yeah, we just kind of, as trying to remember the timeline, but when we were doing all the promo interviews and just getting ready to launch What the Dead Men Say, I think it was maybe like 2 weeks after we put out the Catastrophist video was when COVID started shutting everything down. We had to cancel our Asian tour. And then there was talks like the label was like, do we want to delay the record because we don't know what the hell's going on? But we already let the cat out of the bag. We announced the record was coming out on this day. There's a new song. And then everyone was shut down at, around the world. And then people were just stuck at home. So we kind of felt, regardless of what happens, we wanted to put the record out because felt people would probably appreciate new music during, that crazy time. And then we also, the whole kind of, I guess, starting point of this record was kind of right around the time Dead Men was coming out. And we already, like I said, we already had our Asian tour postponed or canceled. And then the metal tour of the year, which was supposed to have been going out in like June through August of that year, that got, that went away. So, and then at that point last year, no one knew how long this was going to last or how long touring was going to be shut down. Like we thought we would have been, end of the year or maybe like early 2021, things were going to start kicking back up, and just kind of kept getting pushed back a little bit longer. But once we knew we weren't going to be touring for a while, and we're like, hey, we don't know how long this is going to last or when we're going to tour. When touring does come back, do we want to start touring on a record that's a year and a half, 2 years old? Who knows, when we were going to be able to play. So we're like, yeah, it's like, once we start touring, it'd be nice to have a new product to get people excited. There's going to be a lot of bands, especially next year. There's going to be a lot of tours, a lot of bands that are going to be touring because everyone's been shut down. So it's like reopening, and then it's like everyone on the planet's going to want to play shows. So there's gonna be a lot of competition. There's a lot of bands coming out with records now that have been working on it during the pandemic. So we had all this extra time. So we're like, let's just go into the rehearsal spot and just jam. And the, since we just had a record come out essentially at that time, and we had no touring, because usually like over the course of like a year and a half, 2 years of touring, you kind of like stockpile riff ideas, song ideas, kind of collect some thoughts of like what you want to do for the next record and what creatively where you want to go. So you have some time to kind of like flesh it out, concepts and lyrical ideas and whatnot. But obviously this time we didn't have it. We just kind of went in kind of a clean slate. Usually before, everyone would kind of make home demos, record them with like programmed drums, and kind of do like a whole presentation of like, this is my song idea. And this time we didn't have any of that because no one was expecting to write. So we just kind of went to our rehearsal spot, total old school garage band style, and just be like, hey, who's got a riff? And like, we would start a song with like maybe having like 2 riffs that fit together, and be like, hey, I got these riffs that work together, kind of like a song starting point. And then we just kind of wrote everything literally on the spot to finish the song. So we'd always have some kind of musical idea to kind of get the ball rolling. And then it was just all 4 of us in the room, just writing as we went, and just kind of pulling ideas kind of in the moment, kind of I guess technically out of our or whatever. Because like literally just making up riffs like, hey, where do you think this song should go in the middle? And then, I don't know, maybe something like this. And we play a riff, and then we're like, oh, that sounds cool. So we just kept building off the song. So it was a very organic, old school songwriting approach. There's no, Dropbox folders and recording separately, remotely, or anything like that. We just did everything in person, wrote on the spot. And that's kind of how it went. And, probably, before we did this record, we were talking about like, yeah, well, every time we get together to write, usually like the coolest stuff, or the stuff that we really like the most, or the most interesting parts in the songs, are usually parts that we write kind of in that manner, where we just kind of like might have a song idea, and then we get to a part and like, this doesn't feel right, or I think we could do something better. And we just kind of like start jamming and messing around with ideas. And what we come up with is like something that, neither one of us separately would have kind of came to that conclusion. So we wanted to kind of use that element in the songwriting process a lot more. And with COVID and kind of like doing a record when we weren't expecting to do a record, kind of like put us in that scenario like naturally, because we didn't have a lot of stuff demoed, or, you know, maybe even, you know, I think there was one song that was started that Matt came in and was like, hey, I wrote these riffs on my Twitch stream yesterday. What do you think? And we're like, cool, let's write a song with it. So it's a lot of that. And we just always preach that if you're in a band, just like the benefits of just being in a room creating with someone is just something you can't duplicate, you know, over the internet remotely. You know, it's something that we, you know, wouldn't be able to, this record wouldn't have came out the way it did if we didn't have that in-person kind of bouncing riff ideas off each other and stuff like that. So feel really fortunate that even though with a bummer situation, we're able to create something that really positive out of the situation.
Exactly. And this is like the fastest turnaround you guys have had with a record since Ascendancy 2005 and the Crusade 2006. Super kind of crazy to get a new Trivium album this quick, this early. But also I do understand what you're saying in the sense that, like, you know, when you do finally perform these songs live of What the Dead Men Say, you haven't touched that in like a year. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be well over a year since you've even like probably looked at that. So you're going to want something new that you're connected with right here and the now. You know, a song that you wrote with, you know, your friends in a studio that you connect a little bit more to because it's a little bit more recent, probably.
Yeah, and it was also, you know, I guess when we played the shows on this tour, we were playing like 2 songs from What the Dead Men Say in the set. And then when we did a couple off date shows, we did a couple small little headliner shows to kind of fill in some days off. And we played a show in Pittsburgh, and it was kind of like a last minute show because we were supposed to have done a show like opening for Black Label. And then with some kind of scheduling conflict, they canceled some shows or something. So we're like, well, can we do our own show? And like, you know, the promoter was like, oh, I don't know. There's not a whole lot of time to promote it, but we just did like a small little show for fun. And like the energy in the room was just so insane. Like crowd louder than the PA system. Our sound guy at the front of house board was like, they were singing so loud I had to cover my ears. So it was just insane. And then like playing some songs from What the Dead Men Say in front of people. I think it was like, we did like 3 shows. I think this was like the 3rd one, but just hearing, you know, that the record, since it's been out for over a year at that point, people were familiar with the songs, so they were singing them so loud, and it was just like, oh, because it's like you haven't experienced that before. So it was really fun to kind of just hear how into the new material the crowds were, and then also like playing into the Court of the Dragon, and then Feast of Fire. Like people, our fans are, you know, they stay on it. They're, you know, something new comes out, they get really familiar with it really quick, and we kind of learned that. I think the Sin and the Sentence. Yeah. We kind of always, for a while, came out pretty conservative as how many new songs we put out in the set list until the record had been out for a little while. So you're like, oh, we won't play that till we feel like people kind of know it better. And then we went out on the first tour, and people were like, how come we're not playing more songs from the new record? And we're like, I thought we were playing a lot, but people wanted to hear that stuff, you know, right away. So it's gonna be fun. You know, obviously we got a little bit more of a wait before we get back on another tour, but seems like people are gonna be really excited on the metal tour of the year. People were, you know, our fans that came out to the show, they were all singing the new stuff and the Dead Men Say song. So it was good to kind of, you know, have that tour to kind of just see the see actual human beings reacting to it in person again, and you can kind of be like, all right, this stuff's working.
Exactly. And you know, what's so cool is like people that love Trivium have obviously seen you guys multiple times. They've seen you live more than once. And so when you drop a new record, and, you know, anybody that's listened to WSOU knows, I think Trivium is one of the most consistent bands in the rock world. I feel like every album you guys drop is really, really awesome. And there's never like a dip in quality in any of the records, which is so cool. So whenever, you know, Trivium drops a record, fans want to hear that live. They want to hear it as soon as possible when they see you perform. But Another question I wanted to ask you, a little bit more album specific. This is the second record in a row now that you guys have done an album intro track with the number of like what record it is. You know, and what the Deadmen say, you had IX9, that kind of guitar intro leading up to that title track. You know, on this record, you know, you have X, this is the 10th record. And then that kind of leads into that In the Court of the Dragon. Tell me a little bit about what went into that process.
I think literally when we were doing Deadmen, our record label guy, Dave Raff, our A&R dude, he when we were working on songs, I think it was even before we started really diving into writing. Might have been one of I'm trying to think. I think it was our last headlining tour. We were out on a US tour. We had Avatar and Light the Torch with us. And it was like our last headlining tour that we did for what the Sin of the Sentence. And we were playing a show out in like Long Island up near, you know, Roadrunner and all that stuff. So we were hanging out backstage and he just kind of he's a drummer himself. So he's always very picks up a lot of stuff musically that we're doing like that. But, you know, he had mentioned that he's like, yeah, man, it'd be really cool if you guys did an intro to the record that when you go out on tour, you would actually play it. So we're like, all right, we'll keep that in mind. And then, when we started writing the songs, we kind of like took that idea because technically like when we play live, we kind of come in on the heavy part of 9. And that was technically when we were writing What the Deadmen Say, that's how we had the song start. And then we got in the studio, we kind of added some stuff. And then we kind of like, you know, obviously in the world of streaming, you know, having a super long intro to a song, usually you don't get the streams. I guess the algorithm crap, you know, everyone tells you, but we're just like, well, if we cut it off here and make What the Deadmen Say start like on this holdout part, and then we can make this the intro, we're like, all right, that works. And then we'll end up playing it live, like the whole intention. And I think literally just when we were in the studio, I was like, what do we call it? I think it might've been Apollo was like, well, let's call it 9. It's the 9th record. So we're like, all right, that works. You know, it's the intro. Who needs a, you know, elaborate title for the intro? And then since this record, you know, kind of happened so soon after kind of Deadmen, we kind of just kept the theme going. Like it's kind of like a continuation of kind of making these records kind of like be kind of like siblings in a sense, because they're so close together that and they kind of were created, or they kind of have come out in like the same, I guess, timeline of this whole, you know, one came out at the beginning of COVID, and then this one's coming out kind of like, I guess not technically the end, but you know, things are more normal now. So it kind of feels like the back half of COVID, that they're kind of wrapped up in the same timeline. So it's kind of made sense just to keep the theme of just calling it 10 just makes it simple. It's kind of like Led Zeppelin 1, 2, 3, you know, just kind of just run up the numbers. So just kind of seemed like it fit with just kind of continuing that kind of new theme with the records.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for talking with me today. That new record, In the Court of the Dragon, comes out October 8th. All of our WSOU listeners, tune in every single hour. At the top of the hour, release week, we'll be playing it for that whole week straight. Very exciting stuff. We already have Feast of Fire and In the Court of the Dragon playing right now. Yeah. We love Trivium. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me. Usually we're in the studio doing this.
Exactly.